Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Mike Mearls Happy Fun Hour. I'm your host, not surprisingly, Mike Mearls. This week, we're going to be talking about monster design. So, I've got a couple windows open. I'll move this one on the side of my head, and you get to see something here on the left side of the screen, what we call, on the D&D team, our monster, it's either called a one sheet or a white sheet. Both terms have kind of taken off. So what we're going to do is start by showing you the end result of some monster design, and then we're going to start designing some monsters. I've got a few undead critters from 4th edition that I basically just really want to use in my Nantir Reveal campaign. So, hey, this is as good an excuse as any to knock out some creatures. But I wanted to show you the full process from beginning to end, rather than just focusing on the mechanics. To me, what makes monster design a lot of fun is the story element of it. So hello chat, thanks for everyone. France beat Belgium. Wow, I heard there's some people watching here in the office, so I heard a cheer go up. So I knew someone had scored. This would feel like maybe 20 minutes ago, but I wasn't sure who. Sorry, spoiler alert. Any World Cup fans planning on watching the game later, sorry. But so what I thought we would do is start by embiggening the file to our left. Now I realize some of this might get a little cut off with my head, but I'm hoping if I take a look over the monitor, we're not losing too much. Chat, let me know if you can't see this at all, if this is like coming in just really blurry, or if you have any issues reading this. I'm going to go walk you through it, but I know some people like to just read ahead or get a sense of what's going on. So just throw that in there. Let me know. All right, your cart looks like we're fine. Okay, cool, and I'll keep an eye. A little bit larger? Okay, sure. Now keep in mind, I think we found out here, maybe if I just do this, there we go. So then my big head will be over here. How's that working? A little blurry. Okay, maybe I don't want to here. Why does it insist? Okay, it's really insistent that I don't want to. Here we go. Okay, cool. All right, a little larger. We're gonna end up with like one. Oh, there we go. I can actually do that and that. All right, cool. I think that's about. Oh no, I still have a little more room to play with. So this happy fun hour will consist of us just. Whoa, that's too much. See, I don't know if you can see this. For some reason, the little scaling thing is off the edge of my screen because that's just how this works sometimes. Let's do that. As usual, the happy fun hour consists of me using MS Word poorly. Okay, you can read the top paragraph, so you won't be able to read ahead, but at least you can read this. All right, so what we have here, what we do with this kind of the one sheet or the white sheet, depending on what we want to call it, is just lay out the basic identity of a monster. And this is the first thing that we do. For something like the Skulk that's existed in D&D before, part of our homework for this would consist of looking at the prior monster entries and putting them all in one place. And then we'll have a writer's room will convene, and someone will have been nominated to be the person in charge of this monster, and they'll basically present, here's what we know of this monster so far. Then in the room, we'll bounce around ideas of what direction we want to take. What you might notice here is this format is actually pretty important. We've got our intro line here. Empty-souled, invisible creatures of the Shadowfell, skulks enter the material plane and do their master's bidding in return for a slice of a creature's identity. So this is just our quick, we want to interest a dungeon master in using this monster. We want to have a single punchy sentence makes you go, oh, that sounds interesting. So that's like our intro. That's our thesis statement. This is why this monster is interesting and why it exists in the game. And then these bullet points, here, and I'll take a pic. Okay, it looks like you can see the top two, and my head's in the way of the third one, but so I'll scroll up in a second. Well, we'll walk through these. So these bullet points are also meant to be fairly concise. And they're meant to give a little more depth to that opening sentence. We know that in a typical Dungeons & Dragons campaign, if you have a monster, it could be something that ends up being part of a role-playing encounter. Depending on the nature of the monster, it might drive the story of an adventure, so you want to know a little bit more about its identity. And a lot of the times we try to think of why do these things do what they do? And then we think of what they do. Thinking that the what is a pretty simple hook to add to your campaign. This creature likes to steal gems. Okay, that can give me away, it's looted the royal treasury, and the players need to do something about that. And then the why being more the strategic big picture. Well, for this creature, and let's say our theoretical gem-stealing creature, well, these are creatures that are torn from the elemental plane of Earth and compelled to serve others and steal for them. So we may have a creature that's something you might more likely to talk to. When you finally track it down, you realize that this warlock is the one really responsible for it. This creature really couldn't be held accountable. A lawful good character might say, well, the creature, it's as much of a victim as whoever was the target of the robbery. So to give things a little bit more structure here. So what we've got here is this idea of lost souls. So we wanted to come up with this idea of where do these creatures come from? This is important for humanoid creatures especially, because we don't necessarily want there to be an assumption that there are, for instance, for skulks, there are skulk cities, and there's a skulk civilization, and they have a pantheon of deities they worship. We saw the skulk here, if you can read the bullet point. Skulks are travelers who become lost in the Shadowfell and lose all sense of their self. So this tells us that skulks don't occur naturally without there has to be a magical effect, in this case, a planar effect. And so creatures that become lost in the Shadowfell, they become skulks. So this concept of a skulk kingdom doesn't really make sense, but you will get to the little bit of a twist we put on it when we get to the bottom. So we know where they come from. We also know that maybe a DM might use this as something that kind of points to a tragic backstory for one of these creatures. And then what we'll do is, after I walk through this, I'm going to show you the entry on D&D Beyond, so we can see how much of this stuff actually shows up in a product. We have this idea that they're summoned. So we didn't necessarily want skulks to have a strong motive element themselves. We saw them as being tools of other NPCs or creatures. Again, this calls into this idea that DMs sometimes want creatures that are very much, they have a plan, they have something they want to do, they're very active and independent. And other times you want creatures that kind of shelve beneath those real active agents in your world. You just need minions, or you need a nice, flavorful, distinct creature that could be a side quest or the sort of monster of the week, but it's not necessarily something that's going to define the big elements of your campaign. So we're skulks, we have this idea that you could sacrifice some of your own charisma to give these creatures an identity, at least a shadow of an identity. That's what could lure them back to the material plane and would compel them to serve you. And we also like this idea, this kind of creepy thing that they might look a little bit like people that you know. And then we're building this idea with hollow lives, this idea that, they can't speak, but they can understand if you speak to them, they could understand you. And this idea that they seek identities, they have the hollow lives. They don't become things, they sort of steal other people's identity. And this idea, again, they've lost their identity, they don't really have their own independent thing, so they want to take it from others, whether it's given to them to summon them, or once they're in the material world and they run rampant, they are trying to displace other creatures. We also like this fallible invisibility. Invisibility had always been a really signature ability for skulks. We wanted to tap into this folkloric element that their invisibility could be foiled in a few ways. That ties in this idea of identity. That a mirror, right? Like you can see the skulk in a mirror because the skulk has no identity of its own. It can't see itself in the mirror, but you can see it there. Certain candles, right? Fat rendered from a corpse with an unknown identity. So again, that mythic link. Or by small children. This idea that children are still forming their own identity so they can see skulks. Because they have a little bit of a weird sympathetic link to them. And this idea that, now I don't remember if it's carried through, but we have this idea that a see invisibility spell would not see them. So yeah, this is what's kind of fun about Ultra Dicky. So are skulks like YouTube stars? Burned out YouTube stars, maybe. So then when you get to the bottom here, we have this table. And this is something that is really aimed more at the game design end of things. Sage Hallmar, I'm assuming that would not apply to True Sight or True Seeing. That's a great example of thinking about how the invisibility thing works. And you'll see when we look at the final stat block, in this phase, we're not worried about game mechanics. We just want to say, okay, here's some things we want to throw out there that are the story elements. When we get to the game design side, then we have to then have a clear definition of these things. And I can't remember off the top of my head if this is something that was carried through. I'll be curious to see. What we have here in this little table is the idea. It's a quick summary. We just, name and alignment for the creature, its target alignment. And then what we want to do is every creature should be good at something. So what we're saying is the skulk's signature abilities are invisibility, and they're very good at sneaking around. But we also then want to balance that by giving creatures something they're bad at. And often that weakness is something that can make a creature more flavorful than you'd expect. So this idea that they're poor tactics, they don't work together well. They aren't, because they're chaotic, but also because they have this weird thing of they want an identity. They don't have one, so they don't. That extends this idea of not having an identity with a group. They don't think of themselves as part of something. They're empty, and this idea they're not physically powerful. Getting at this idea that since they're invisible, they have trouble imposing their will on the world around them. And again, that's kind of that idea here. And then we have a quick summary of the stats, and this just the plus sign here shows us they should have a good dexterity. And the minus signs on all these other 4 stats say they should have weak or basically no bonus here at most, if not a penalty. And then we specify we think their charisma should be 1 or even 0. And this is another example where, like, when we were writing these notes up, like I don't think you can actually have a 0 in a stat in D&D. But again, this is just pure storytelling. And then this is a note, and these are the kind of things where we expect, especially the game design side. So here's our note: invisibility can only be counted by specific in-world elements mentioned above. So that's this from the story side. For telling the mechanical side, here's our target. This is what we'd like to hit. But obviously, if it's not going to work mechanics-wise, then we'll get as close as we can. So BNAA UK asks, why would they be chaotic evil, not chaotic neutral? That ties back to this bullet point here of Hollow Lives. That if they were more content with their identity, or if they were content with copying others as a general rule, then they would probably trend more toward chaotic neutral. But the Skulks specifically want to take over other people's identity. That makes them more predatory, and that's what pushes them more toward evil. And that's generally how we handle alignment when we design. The alignment is a starting point. Rather than it saying, okay, we're going to dictate now specifically how you act, we use it to flavor and sort of diagnose, like, here's how this creature, when it's idling, when it doesn't really have, the characters aren't on the screen or on scene, whatever, is this creature malevolent? Is it benevolent? Or does it want to just be left alone? That's kind of a handy way to think of good, neutral, and evil. Chaotic being, does this creature think of itself first? Lawful being, does this creature think of the group first? Does it look for an outside source? Or is it somewhere in the middle where it'll listen to a rule if it's a rule that it helped make or that it's in its close circle, but otherwise is really reliant on its own judgment. And so that kind of gives us some of that flavor there. And then chaotic fitting of this creature, because of its lack of identity, seeing it as extending to this lack of group identity. So that's what pushed us to the sort of chaotic evil corner. The MD Saraji asks, what makes some monsters uncommon or rare? Great question. Actually, I just I just skipped right over that. This entry here, this works with when we're talking about what we think of as tribal creatures. So imagine if this was the goblin sheet, which we actually did for the monster manual at the launch of the game. We would have, this description would apply to the typical goblin, so like that goblin warrior type. Then the uncommons and rares would point to us to exceptional individuals that we also want to stat out. So, for instance, actually, I'll open D&D Beyond. We can take a look at one of the entries. Here now, we got the Skulk here, but I'll keep my place there rather than. If I go to D&D Beyond and actually show you an example here. Oops, what just happened? Oh, that's fun. Uh-oh. I think this is the first time we've had like an actual semi-traumatic software failure. Okay, luckily it is just Microsoft Edge that's having an issue. Wow, it's like a miniature blue screen here. You guys seeing that? Okay, let's do this. Let's close our window. Is that gonna work? Nope. Wow, apparently like moving the window to the side is just what killed this. So you know what? We're gonna do this. Always playing with fire here. You never know what's going to happen, but let's just end that task. Thank you. It's a little faint echoes of my days running. I was at Kill 9 on Unix systems way back in the day. Okay. Yeah, let's just do that. Let's play it safe. So I tried to save our place and ended up nuking our browser. There's a lesson in there, but I refuse to learn it. All right, so let's go back to the goblins. And then we'll go to the goblin monster entry. So this would be our common goblin here. The stat block you're seeing up here. I won't zoom in because if you're watching this, you probably know what a goblin is. And then the uncommons and rares would be if we go to let's go to our official list of monsters and just search for all our goblins. So the goblin boss would be a great example of a rare. This would be a creature we'd say, hey, a goblin who takes over and becomes a leader. They have some specific abilities we want to capture that makes them distinct. Again, that gets that tribal thing, that it's a group that works together. Let's see, what other goblins do we have here? Oops, did not mean to do that. Meant to break that down. Hobgoblin's a good example. Since they're now, this is actually another interesting thing. Goblins being neutral evil don't necessarily have as much regimentation. Hobgoblins, though, being lawful evil, are really big on like hierarchies and jobs. So the Devastator being a Hobgoblin spellcaster, the Iron Shadow being a Hobgoblin monk and kind of secret police, and then the Captain, the Warlord being a low-level commander, high-level commander. So these guys here, probably Devastator and Iron Shadow and Captain would be our uncommons, and our Warlord would be a rare. Often they also scale up in complexity. So, and essentially what we're going to do today is I want to design some skeletons and zombies, and I'm basically going to be dropping in some new uncommon and rare creatures of that type. So, one last thing I want to do quickly before, because I don't want to spend too much time just talking at you, I actually want to do some design here. X Thunderhorn. The problem is he's using Microsoft Edge. Internet Exploder and all those jokes from back in the day. So when we look here at the Skulk, and let me, let's see. So I'm hoping this comes through, but if you're online, just take a peek at the stat block. I forget off the top of my head how to make this bigger, and I don't want to anger Microsoft Edge any more than I already have. But if you can see here, if you can read it, the strength on this guy is 6. So we delivered on our, hey, not a high strength. Con and Int both came in at 10, and I think that was primarily, we had them flagged as lower ability scores. Con coming in at 10 is often where you'll find a low ability score for a monster, just so we don't really hurt its hit points too much, and having to just like throw on a bunch of extra hit dice just to make the hit points work. Intelligence 10, this is probably one where, as we thought about it, for these creatures to be, they'd have to be somewhat clever to make the most of their invisibility. If they were too low intelligence, it might just sort of beggar, like, well, okay, these guys aren't that clever. How can they actually set up ambushes or trick you and things like that? It was kind of running counter to the rest of the monster's story. We asked for high dex. We got 119, almost the sort of player character maximum. Our wisdom at 7 is really to counterbalance this intelligence thing. Sure, they can come up with smart plans, but they don't necessarily execute them well. They may get rash. They may underestimate creatures. And the charisma 1, as we specified, these guys should have the lowest charisma we can give them. And their stealth skill coming in at 8. So with their challenge rating of 1/2, they'd have 4 plus 2 for proficiency, and it looks like we gave them an additional +2, essentially bonus for being a skulk. If you see skills that don't look like they're adding up correctly, that could either represent we are invisibly giving the creature expertise, we're doubling its bonus, or we're just giving it a flat bonus to capture what we're aiming for a bonus. I kind of think it is just, it's a bonus to expertise for that specific skill, or doubling. With our invisibility here, we do give them that it can be circumvented by 3 things, but notice it does not appear that we are saying that invalidates other methods. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is something to do with this idea that it's just there's so many effects that could potentially detect invisibility that we didn't want to say no way it can do it, because that might cut off some ones which would make sense, like a very high level spell like True Seeing. So we did back it up with trackless. So this may have been saying, okay, if we are allowing magic, we're not trying to limit that so much. This is an extra ability that makes them more invisible, like into more of a strategic sense. If you walk into the town that skulks have kind of taken over, this helps preserve the mystery. The ranger does a search. So are there any tracks coming through here? You don't see any. So yeah, and then you can even see here some of these bullet points, like the Hollow Lives was a bullet point in the write-up. It just was transferred over and kept. So yeah, there we go. Oh, well, look, 9 minutes ago. Hey, Gaius, Octavian, Alert, thank you. Coming in and asking a question. That is right. Correct. Nice. All right, so that's kind of gives you a sense of a big picture, a quick walkthrough in 20 minutes of how we design creatures. So any questions? I'm going to take a quick look at chat, see if we Captain Killsteel, I see dead people. Is that every DM's opening, when you're about to have a big fight with the boss battle? Let the players know. I see dead people. Let's see. Fooster asks, do monsters have roles? If you played 4th edition, and actually, you know what? That's a great segue. I will just crack open. You know, let's do skeletons. I'll do skeletons. So, oh no. Let's try this. Oh no. No, this is not. You know, this is funny because this just updated to. Aha, there we go. Oh, Edge. Okay, Edge, you angered me, but now you've come to our rescue by opening a PDF. You know, Adobe the PDF reader updated to my machine today, and it's like, it's time to restart. And I was like, yeah, no, I restart for no one, except for when Microsoft makes me restart. So the monster rolls came in on 4th edition, and they were designed to give monsters clearer roles in terms of encounter building. Because in 4th edition, there was this idea that you would have one monster per player character. That was kind of the ideal. And then the monsters would work together like a party of player characters. Role was a sort of shorthand for class. That it told you, here's generally what this creature should do, and a good monster grouping will include multiple roles, and will generally always include at least one soldier and one brute. And the minion role being a little more descriptive of these guys, basically I think it was 4 or 5 minions equaled one creature of that same level. So there was the idea you could throw in lots of hordes against the party. 5th edition just tried to, by having monsters always remain a threat, but their hit points essentially scaling down as you gain more power, tried to just kind of pick that up in passing, rather than have to make an exception to the rule for how these creatures worked. We kind of designed with roles in mind. With 5th edition, there's a little bit more of a flexibility. What would often happen is, if you look at this blazing skeleton here, which is actually a creature... Oh no, can I zoom? Oh no. Okay, I don't know how to zoom using this browser. It's my favorites. This is sharing. I'm sharing with you right now. Here we go. All right, make that nice and embiggen that. And hopefully my head's not getting in the way. Okay, that's great. Oh, wait. So if you take a look here, our blazing skeleton is artillery. Now, artillery would sometimes have this fire R abilities. Any creature that starts its turn in the R takes 5 fire damage. That was actually a bit of a common thing you'd see some designers throw in artillery, this idea that if you get up close to them, they have a way to push you away. Artillery, as they would say, they're basically our long-range creatures. Not so good in close combat, but good at hitting you from far away. And if we go across the page break here, we can see they have a close combat attack, this Blazing Claw, which doesn't do very good damage, 1d4 plus 1 and ongoing 5. Ongoing 5 fire damage basically said the start of each of your turn, you took this damage. I think it was the start, maybe in the end. It's been a while. If you compare that, the ranged attack is essentially doing 1d4 plus 3 more damage. So you're, and duplicating the ongoing 5 fire. This guy actually has a little bit beefier attacks for close combat than you might expect on an artillery. Plus, the one thing, now this is something which in 4th edition did this a lot, and I think it was actually a challenge, because I think information overflow is something that 4th edition had as a challenge for DMs. This is an attack against armor class. This flame orb range attack is an attack against reflex defense. So rather than roll your saving throws, you had static defenses. An idea that sounds good in theory, but in practice what would happen is, and we observe this when we watch people play, DMs would just think this was an attack against armor class. They would often forget to target the defense. So what it meant was this, essentially you're attacking a defense, that's the equivalent of a +2 bonus. This is essentially +8 for this damage versus +10 for about 5.5 more points of damage. But often DMs would forget to roll against reflex. And so this sort of very subtle benefit would be lost on a lot of players. And that's one of the big reasons why we shifted back to saving throws being rolled rather than having static defenses, was the defenses were this is just such a subtle difference in realizing +8 versus reflex versus +8 versus AC for many DMs. There are DMs who got that and were good at managing all that information, but especially beginning DMs, they would just end up frustrated because this attack maybe wasn't quite pulling its weight in the way it should. So anyways, that's how the rolls work. And so and actually I think so it'll be a good way I'll show you, I'm going to design the Blazing Skeleton. Let's pick that one up, because I think the Blazing Skeleton's kind of cool. And I'll show you kind of how that might translate over to 5th. Let's take maybe a couple more, see if there's any more questions that look like pressing. Yeah, this is like, I forget who the artist is here, but I love, part of the reasons why I want to bring these guys in is I just like this art. And I love like this flourish here on the Bone Shard skeleton of that like weird purple flame, and we designed this guy, we're going to do something with him. So yeah. So let's see what else we got here. Yeah, Daedalus Wing, rolling equals drama. That's definitely something which we have found, is that people like rolling, especially I think saving throws on the player side. I think it's one of those things where you can make a case, I think very easily, that having defenses makes more sense in terms of its consistency. But I think players liked the idea that, hey, the dragon breathes, now everyone gets to roll. It's also one of those things where I think just in terms of the at the table experience of the players, that felt a little more empowering. They felt more like, oh, I'm going to dodge out of the way of this thing, rather than I'm just going to take it because the DM tells me, hey, I got a 19, and that hits your reflex defense. It's one of those things where the practicality of the practicality of game design, in the sense of like, let's make methods that move very quickly and are easy to understand, can come into conflict with the emotional resonance of the play at the table. Sometimes things are emotionally resonant because they aren't necessarily streamlined. That you actually want to pause and have a little handling time on something because that actually marks it as being different and important. It's kind of like in a text document. If you watch me type and I'm going to open the template, we bold things, we have underline under things. This is how we show you this is different and that's important because what's following now is important. So yeah. Anyway, so let's design this creature. Now, I like the Blazing Skeleton. It's one of my favorite creatures. I love the skeletons and zombies from 4th edition. I always thought they were so much fun because I love undead, because I love zombie movies. Growing up, my mom, huge horror movie fan. My uncle, huge horror movie fan. Basically, almost everyone in my mom's side of the family loved horror movies. Every Friday night, or it was either Friday or Saturday, my grandmother had access to cable. It's back in the 70s and early 80s when cable TV, if you're old, back in the day, you used to have a wire that would run from a company to your TV, and you'd plug it in, and that's how you got TV. If you're even older, it used to just come, it was wireless. We went from wireless TV to wired TV. It's actually kind of a step back, I guess. But she had HBO and Cinemax, and I think it was every Friday or Saturday night, one of those two would have a horror movie on, like at 8 or 10 o'clock at night. And so maybe once a month we'd go over and we'd all, as a family, make pizza, make popcorn, and watch a horror movie. Even as I saw horror movies as a very young child, I was exposed to like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It might explain how I got this job. I was trained for it. My mom's feeling was rated R, which was supposed to be this guideline that said, hey, this movie's not appropriate for kids under 17. But it said not appropriate for children under 17 who are not accompanied by an adult. So my mom, I think, interpreted it as, well, I'm with him, so it's okay. We can go see Jaws 3 when he's 7. No sweat. So, but in any case, enough about that. Let's talk monsters. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to do to take the lazy way out and just go save as. You get to see here, and you got to see the stat block template. I want to lay down some story elements here. These skeletons are essentially the uncommon and rare versions of our existing skeletons, so I am not looking to write like the next great gaming story with these guys, because I really just want burning skeletons that try to burn you to death. That's enough for me. Call me simple. Call me a humble man with simple tastes. But I just want my blazing skeleton to burn things. But I do want to come up with a sense of a myth behind it. So these guys, skeletons right now in... Oh, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go to our monsters. Let's take a look at our current skeleton so we can see what we're dealing with, what already exists in the game. And I'm going to look at the base skeleton. I know there's a couple other larger ones that are essentially upgun versions. But here's our skeleton. So skeletons clock in at challenge rating 1/4, so they're not really challenging on their own. If first level characters should be able to handle a couple of these pretty easily. They're vulnerable to bludgeoning damage. They don't like getting their bones broken. Their AC is really where you'd expect it to be for a challenge rating 1/4, i.e. not high, a fair amount of hit points, and they got a short sword and short bow. These are essentially just, run-of-the-mill guys that you can use to pack up an encounter or challenge very, very low-level characters. And then we have this idea of habitual behaviors, that they essentially can pantomime actions from their past lives. Basically, the bones still remember what they did. The necromantic energy that drives them compels them to kill unless they're under command by their master. One thing we have said is that this is essentially just necromantic magic that's driving them. It's not like the spirit of the person who is animated is trapped here. But there is an echo of them, but it's not, their soul isn't bound to the skeleton. And I thought that would be kind of a fun thing to tie into this, was that our MOP 314159 Skeleton and Gelatinous Cube is a classic rite of passage. See, that's fun, right? I love the undead trapped in the gelatinous cube. So when it sucks a player in, they have something else to play with. I also love the classic, like a flooded chamber with undead creatures like hiding in the water, or an entire flooded dungeon with undead in it. That's fun. Because going underground and underwater at the same time, not fun. If you're following the news, they rescued the kids from that flooded cave. Thank goodness. I know that was incredibly harrowing. I'm sure it was a very harrowing experience. You think the time and effort they had to put into that, moving underwater, not fun. So a good way to terrify your characters. So what I want to do here with the Blazing Skeleton, the idea I kind of had in my mind was I want to tie these guys in some ways to either powerful necromancers or Orcus. And I kind of thought what would be fun is, like, what if the idea of like creating a Blazing Skeleton was a secret you could learn from Orcus? This is why a necromancer might throw in with him. And the other idea, seeing as our current skeleton is CR1 quarter, I wanted these guys to be a little beefier. I was going to initially throw them in as CR1. That might change, though. I also do want to keep the Laminate Chaotic Evil, because I think that's going to match up with our Demon Prince of the Undead. So I'm not going to write the full thing out, but what I want to do is come up with some basic ideas. So we have Fiery Soul. So this is the kind of concept I had, was that if you are a priest of Orcus, there's a ritual you learn if you want to animate a skeleton. Take the skeleton of someone who died in a fire, and you can enact a ritual over it. Normally when you animate the undead, this is a specialized ritual for this specific skeleton, drawing on that skeleton story of there's echoes of their past lives. So take someone, they died in a fire, burned away the flesh, you have the skeleton left, you can then enact a ritual on it to reignite that fire that killed it. So that's basically what we've got. We have a skeleton, someone died in a fire, we're capturing that fire and igniting it again. And that gets the sense that's why it's burning so hot. We're going to pick up some of those special abilities from the 4th edition skeleton. What makes a standard skeleton lawful evil while zombies are neutral evil? That comes down to the idea that skeletons they follow orders well. So that was this idea of lawful, that they are good at obeying their masters. Zombies being less intelligent, being more likely to just stagger about and commit evil. The Blazing Skeleton being chaotic evil, being the risk here is that, like fire, it's hard to control. So now, reflecting that mechanics might be something we don't do. We'll see. We'll see. We're also going to say... And again, I'll just do a quick bullet point. I'm not going to write an entire thesis because I want to get to designing the full thing. But I think it's worth noting out, these creatures are created by rituals accessible only to those who bargain with Orcus. Now, you can replace Orcus with any deity from your own home campaign, a fire god, another god of the undead, anyone else will work. The important thing here is I want to just tie this idea that there's some hidden knowledge, Now you might think, well, what's the purpose of that? Like, really, you're throwing in this detail. Why say that? The real idea behind it is to give a little bit more of a strategic layer to these creatures in the story. A dungeon master can always ignore the flavor we have. For your own campaign, you can say these guys are whatever. These guys are the taxi drivers in my campaign city. Why not? Hey, I can do whatever I want. But what we're doing here is saying, hey, this could tie what might seem like a random encounter into a bigger truth in my campaign. These guys are going to be used by evil clerics, warlocks, wizards. There's a force behind them. They don't just spontaneously arise. Now, again, in your own campaign, you might just decide this is the site of a big fire, destroy this building, the souls are restless. I'll use the Blazing Skeleton as the stat block to reflect the monster. Totally cool. It's more for our storytelling, so we are kind of giving a little more, obviously giving consistency, but also when we think of all the things we can use, this gives us ways to tie these into bigger elements of a story. So we're kind of saying these guys need to be tied to someone who created them, because otherwise they're not going to arise. So think of them as like good troopers for a cult. And again, that's kind of what we're tying them into. And again, that's the important thing is these bullet points, that's just for us. Again, for you, we try not to put things in here that tie them too closely to the story. For instance, mechanically. That might be why when you look at the Skulk, we didn't put in the rules, when you summon these, you can sacrifice Charisma to bring them in. I think the write-up had that, but I don't believe the mechanics had that. And I think it was trying to straddle that line. Between giving you something really useful for your campaign and inspiring you, but then not making you feel like you're restricted. So for instance, we wouldn't say mechanically these creatures must be tied to someone that had a ritual and then we put in a stat, say a special ability. Instead, it's really just in the flavor text. Use it if it inspires you, ignore if it doesn't. The Archangel Derek, I just realized Mike might be accidentally creating Ghost Rider in D&D. Oh, that's going to be the rare Ghost Rider. Oh, the copyright Marvel Comics. Oh god, I don't want to get sued. Just kidding. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Mike Mearls Happy Fun Hour. I am your host, Mike Mearls. I am the franchise creative director on Dungeons and Dragons. So hello chat. How's everything going today? Everyone enjoying a fine Tuesday? It's 1 o'clock here in the Pacific Northwest. I just got back from lunch, had a lunch meeting. And I'm ready to talk skeletons. Skeletons kind of opposite I'm feeling. I ate too much at lunch. Oh, we had Greek food. I hadn't had it in a while. So I feel like anti-skeletal today, more zombie-like. Maybe we'll tackle a zombie before the end of the hour. So Justin Gann, it was a good lunch. It was Greek food. I love Greek food. So I had 2 gyros. I should have just had one. But I couldn't help myself. I went back up and got a second one. We had a lunch meeting because we had a spread of food set up. So what we got here, last week we talked about the Blazing Skeleton, and what I wanted to do was show you some tweaks I made to it. Last week I intended to have the spreadsheet that we use to get a starting point for our challenge calculations. And one thing I want to throw out there is I'm going to show you the spreadsheet, but keep in mind we use the spreadsheet to just get an initial sense of a creature's relative power. It is not like we don't just punch the numbers in and say we're done. It serves as a starting point for us. So taking a look at the Blazing Skeleton over here on the left side of your screen, CW3 Claire, very, very charismatic, and that was by design, and you'll see it because we're gonna get through the full design of a couple other creatures today, hopefully a couple. One idea about the Blazing Skeleton is this is because it's intelligence 8, which might not seem like a lot, but if we go to Handy Dandy D&D Beyond. See, I was looking up skeletons before. Compared to other skeletons, this guy's a sharp cookie. Our typical skeleton's intelligence is 6. So this guy is 33% smarter. And smart enough to the point where we'd expect, where here we've got understands all languages but can't speak. Our guy here can speak Common and Abyssal. So the story behind the skeleton is it's a special burning, flaming skeleton. You might be able to see it right here next to my head. This is a skeleton that can be animated from the body of someone killed by flame. And Orcus, or sort of insert your favorite sort of creepy necromantic Lord of the Undead, teaches necromancers or evil clerics how to create this specific type of undead. And some of the tweaks you'll see compared to last week kind of play into that. But this idea is it's a little more intelligent. It's basically a pyromaniac. It just loves to burn things, loves to spread devastation. And the idea behind its high charisma is it really is the force of that magic, the fire magic, that's keeping it together. And what I imagine is, running with the Orcus theme, it's an animated undead creature, but its sort of essence is demonic in some way. It might be a demon that died and now was in service to Orcus or something like that. We don't have space for the full story thing. But the idea is this guy had a lot more personality. Also, because it's channeling fire magic, I wanted charisma to be its casting stat. It's not a studied caster. Wisdom, it's not very insightful. It's just pure force of personality, allowing it to control fire. So, wanted to take a quick look here and walk you through a few things that shifted since last time based on our spreadsheet, which I'm going to pop up now. Oops, I'm not going to pop up now because I hit the wrong button. Okay, why are you doing that? Oh, it's right up. It's popping up. I thought it was going to pop up over here. Oh, that's hilarious. I'm sure all of you watching, it's right there in front of your eyes. So this is a spreadsheet we use. It accounts for a variety of different effects, like resistance, things like that. Again, this is just something we do for a quick first pass to capture a creature's armor class, hit points. We have some baseline things we account for its abilities, and then we capture basically the first few rounds of its combat ability. We kind of assume that to determine a creature's power, we really mainly care about the first 3 rounds of a fight. If once a fight goes beyond 3 rounds, there's so much variability, it's really hard to start in a system accounting for everything that could possibly happen to give you something that has a really fine point to it. So what I wanted to do is kind of show you here how I would have approached this creature, and as I walk through, I'll show you some things I ran into. So to start with, we've got our AC 14. We do give a little bit of a AC bonus for flying. And when I say that, what it means is obviously the creature's armor class isn't changing. What we're getting at is this idea that a flying creature, especially at low levels, is more defensible. It can escape melee attacks, it can fly around, shoot, then maybe get someplace where the players can't get to it, things like that. So we account for that in the sort of abstract by assigning the creature an artificially heightened armor class when we think of its challenge rating. And again, this is why the spreadsheet is a starting point. It's not the end point, because this is just giving us an estimate. It tells you that you're in the right area or not, or it tells you what area you're in, and then from there, play testing and feedback and actually comparing to other creatures, that's where that comes in. So we've got our 14 here. Saving throw bonuses here. I threw this down as none. It just has 2 saves it's proficient in, so that's really not distorting it enough, and 1's charisma. It's not enough really to trigger this one here. Doesn't have the spell shield. This is one that we actually have to call out because it does, when you think about that 3-round constraint, when you're trying to capture that sort of the first few rounds of a fight, shield can be very useful if in one of those 3 rounds or even more, it's getting a significant boost to AC. Then we come to our hit points, pretty straightforward. So this guy, 5 hit dice, D8 hit die size, con modifier of 1 because of Constitution 13. I often myself, this is a area where I'll tinker with a lot. Hit points to me, unless it's a creature, and you'll see this when we maybe do the zombies, unless the creature's signatures, it's really hard to kill for its challenge, I just kind of set my armor class, set my abilities, and then see where, if I just tinker with hit dice as a first pass, where do we end up? Grumblefist, is there a reason mage armor is not also taken into consideration? We would normally just include that in the armor class. So if you had a creature with mage armor, even if its armor class was 10 to start with, we would just assume it's going to have it cast before a fight begins. So we would just, its AC would just include that. And typically, there is a lot of art to, especially with monsters using spells or NPCs, getting a sense of if it's ready for a fight, what do its stats look like? Assuming that the players surprise it or ambush it, that they are going to get an advantage, especially against a caster. So then we just get our hit dice size, con modifier, and so for me, 27 hit points, as you can see, reflected over here. That's something where I like to tinker with. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can, in case you can't see it. This is, for me at least, in my design, I like to tinker with hit dice. Unless I'm getting hit point things that look ridiculous or compare very poorly to other things of that challenge, then I'll back away. There are a few things here that kind of tinker essentially like armor class, kind of getting a virtual adjustment. Resistance essentially is a hit point boost. Immunities, regeneration, you're getting hit points back. So things like that. Capture attack bonus here, that's pretty straightforward. In this case, there is a little weirdness in the game where your proficiency bonus is determined by your challenge, but your accuracy determines your challenge. So it's kind of a circular, effect here. So typically I'll come in with a target challenge in mind, and therefore a target proficiency bonus. Our Blazing Skeleton's laying at +6 because with its dex of +4 and its proficiency of +2 at the challenge I'm shooting for of 1. And then we come down here, just there's some stuff off to the right, but don't worry about it, it's just detail. And this is here what we just do is just capture, assuming everything hits, and assuming that everyone fails their saving throws, how much damage does this creature do each round for the first 3 rounds of a fight? This creature is pretty simple because it doesn't have any limited abilities. It just has its explosive ember attack. What we do when we do anything that's an area of effect, we assume we are going to take that area of effect damage on 2 targets. Now, the Blazing Skeleton's a little bit different, though. Because let's say if this was just an AoE attack, we'd say, what's your damage? Now double it, that's your effective damage. Since this is, you hit a target and to do damage to it, and then other creatures within 5 feet also take some damage, we assume that the two targets are the initial creature you hit, and then one other creature in that 5-foot radius. So that's why you see this damage is 14. 9 for the initial hit from the explosive ember, and then 5 from the 1d10 fire damage to one additional creature. This doesn't really account for the fact that this is creatures, so in theory, if the Blazing Skeleton had allies next to the target, they would take damage. We don't try to do anything like finesse that, because that's really just dungeon mastering tactics and how you're portraying the monsters. Off-turn damage is 3, because this guy has a fiery aura. We assume, again, what I assumed here was you'd probably have one character hanging on that aura, as the typical case. One person, the fighter or someone getting up close and beating it down. And that gives us the expected damage of 17 per round. Now, since this guy also now explodes, and I'll talk about this in a second, for 7 damage, I also assumed, because it's 10 feet, I did count this one as only maybe tagging one character. You could argue that that's incorrect, but that's an area where playtesting will help us sort that out. If you have legendary actions, you account for them here, and it's a very similar thing. You just, how many actions can it take? What damage, if any, can it inflict? And if it has lair actions, you account for those here too. Typically, we try not to put a lot of damage in lair actions, because otherwise, if the creature's not in its lair, it starts changing its challenge potentially, and that can just be a little bit messy. So here's our total damage output. Here's our average. There's a bunch of features. You can toggle these on and off. Again, we just do a rough approximation of how this virtually changes your armor class or your damage, your attack bonus. And that gives you a rough. Now, let's say here I hit CR1, again, with a spreadsheet. So this is, I can go ahead and play test with this. But let's say if we're like, you know what, Mike, we think this actually really, it's going to hit 2 guys. Let's change that to 17, because we think a second character is going to get caught in that explosive end ability. That would actually put us up to CR2. Even if I have decided, you know what, I'm only going to think one character, I often will just tinker with things like that to get a sense of, well, will this actually change the challenge? In this case, it does. So that tells me when I go to playtesting, I really do have to keep an eye on this creature, because if I'm off in any of my assumptions, it is going to shift it to the point where it maybe should be challenged too. Now, I am going to keep this at 10, because I do think most players, because once they see that someone's taking damage being close to this guy, that they need to get away, I think most parties will very quickly know, I need to move away before, it's dangerous to be close to it. What it also might say, though, is rather than 10 feet, maybe this should be 5 feet. And I could easily see someone arguing, no, this is, the party gets the sense that within 5 feet is dangerous, and then you're making it 10. That could potentially catch people by surprise. So that's something I'd keep an eye out for. My feeling is now, what the real important thing here as a designer working in the game is when you're filling in your information here, have a real sense of what's important. Because this is kind of what happened next with this creature. When I first did the spreadsheet, what I found was, and I think, I posted this on Twitter, if you happen to have happen to have seen the version I posted on Twitter, I can't remember the exact numbers, but what I recall was this explosive ember was not doing anywhere near as much damage as it is right now, 2d8 and 1d10. And I was really unhappy about that, because I really felt that what I wanted this creature to feel like was it was throwing a miniature fireball at you every round. That's the flavor I was looking for. And so to see that ability not standing out, because I had other abilities creeping in, kind of taking up that damage budget, so to speak, at the challenge I was aiming for, that made me say, you know what? The original, I had these as weapon attacks. And as weapon attacks, they were adding in the dexterity modifier. That modifier of +4, especially on the melee attack, was such a big element of the damage. And especially at challenge 1, that it was distorting everything. It was making me, I had to use a smaller die here, and then obviously I couldn't do it on the splash damage, because 5 is what's working. If I'm at +4, it's just nothing. And as I mentioned last week, if you saw, I really like the sense that this creature's chaotic. Skeletons off the shelf are neutral evil. I wanted this guy, since it has more personality, to be chaotic, and therefore I like the idea of having these high variance attacks, like 2d8 damage, Could be 2, could be 16. It's probably gonna be somewhere in the middle. But if I crit you, then it's 48, which is very unhappy. And also the aura fire damage, feeling very variable. It could be 1, it could be 10. It's an equal chance of either. I really want to emphasize that. So when I went back, I made this a spell so I could pull that flat modifier out of there, put more damage into the dice, bring my other attacks down a bit. My aura, I actually think the aura didn't change. But to really make sure that this Explosive Ember ability was the signature effect the Blazing Skeleton was bringing to the table. I would have gotten rid of the fire aura if I had to, but I was able to make it with a 5-foot radius for 3 damage. Now, let me talk a little bit about Explosive End. Todd Kenrick, who might be watching, I haven't seen him in chat yet. He works with us, does a lot of videos. If you watch the D&D Beyond videos, he had a suggestion, like, what if when this creature died, it exploded, but if it killed anything, it brought humanoid creatures back as blazing skeletons. And I really like that because it really captured the flavor of thinking of Orcus, or insert your favorite undead, Lord of the Undead here. That maybe the undead that they help create are more viral in nature. They replace living creatures, literally. Like the classic zombie movie trope: you get bitten, you turn into a zombie. So I like bringing that in, and I like tying it into this really like explosive end attack, rather than just all their attacks in general. It seemed like a nice cadence storytelling wise. So and I know a lot of people online were asking, well, dude, make it explode, right? I mean, make it explode. Everyone likes it when it explodes. So essentially that gives you kind of a sense of where the sort of math comes in. It is really important, though, and to think about when you're working with the math, you really need to have a sense of what do you want to make prominent about this creature, because the spreadsheet doesn't care. The spreadsheet's just going to take any number you put in. You could say on round 3 it's going to do 0 damage on round 1, 0 damage on round 2, and on round 3 it's going to do 58 damage. Well, that's an average of 19, challenge 1, right? What you're doing there is you're telling a story, right? It's a creature that's harmless. It's harmless, then oh my god, it's going to murder low-level characters. And keeping in mind what that narrative is going to look like, and then you making sure that the math matches the narrative, rather than trying to distort your narrative to match the math. So that was kind of what I saw here as I was working the Blazing Skeleton and refining it. Archmage Derek, shouldn't the skeleton shed bright light naturally? Yeah, it should probably have a feature in here. I think like you can pick that up from the Magmin or something like that. That's the... Yeah, I thought originally it wouldn't, but there's, some of our creatures, they do have, if they are burning, they ignited illumination. No, that's the setting itself. This guy doesn't. There are other creatures, though, that I believe if they are shedding light, it doesn't note it. So that's something which, we'd have to pick up. And that's a good cleanup pass, like to go through and when you're working on a creature, if you want to get it, especially if you're going to publish, say, the DM's Guild, you want to be very thorough. For your own purposes, at DMing a house game, it doesn't matter. But if you're getting something ready for publication, if you're going to put out there in the DM's Guild or wherever, it's really good to just search D&D Beyond. For instance, what I might do with this creature is show me my advanced filters, and I'm going to look through here and go, show me everything that's immune to fire, because that's probably a good starting point to pick up if there's any traits and things like that I should be looking at. And I see a lot of dragons. It's not as useful, but the Azer. Is there anything here I should look at? Oh, hey, there's illumination, right? And that's the kind of trait that'll pop up and go, oh, okay, maybe I should use that. Typically, when you do that, what I would suggest is do a search for like a shared feature, and then compare it by challenge. You don't necessarily have to worry about like, oh, what's the dragon necessarily gonna? I mean, maybe, but I mean, if you're like me, you only have so much time during the day. So what I would do is focus on a creature of a similar challenge, that spread. And then just see, is there anything I'm missing? Is this illumination effect? Should I have that? I can also see things like heated body. Okay, I'm seeing wording here for my fiery aura that I'd probably go back and rewrite it to match this. And that is to me, it's benevolent laziness, right? Like, why reinvent the wheel when I could just take this ability, give it different flavor, but just pick up this text, right? Now, in this case, this one's dealing damage only on a hit if you touch or hit it. So I would not use it because it'd be not the one I'm going for, but I might find a creature with a similar effect and I can just pick up that language. So yeah, that's where we are with Blazing Skeleton. That's the refinement pass I did with the spreadsheet. And then obviously to make this publishable, then I would do a little more research and make sure that I'm hitting all the notes I need for this creature to function. The so what I want to show you really quick, because what I did, actually I'm going to just be straightforward about it. I needed a creature for my game. I wanted to design it, and so I'm going to show you a creature I designed. That's a legendary creature, and then we're going to design a creature from scratch. I want to do a legendary zombie. Oh no, sorry, a demon. Yeah, you'll see though. It's going to be tied into our thing. Or maybe we'll do a zombie. We'll see. I'll let chat decide. So this was the Skeleton Guardian. I'm rewriting Keep on the Shadowfell 4th edition adventure, rebuilding it for my Interior Vale campaign. I want to make it like this really important location dedicated to Orcus. So this is kind of the genesis of all this. Let's make a bunch of undead. It's for my home campaign. And chat, sound off if you want. I see a vote for demon. I see a vote for legendary zombie. I'm seeing kind of where we're tied. It probably won't be. I'll try to keep a sense of where we're going with that. I kind of, legendary zombie would be weird, and it'd be kind of fun to see what that might look like. So I'm going to walk you through. I actually have here the spreadsheet here for this legendary skeleton. So let's do this. Let's put this guy here. So what I wanted was, that's the guy. If we take a peek back here, let me see if I've got, skeletons. So I'll do this, and then we will actually, you know, it'd be easier if I do this. Just throw this over here. Oops, that's what I wanted. Do this. So hopefully my head doesn't get in the way. We will enhance. And I'll take a look. This was one of my favorite creatures from 4th edition. I love the 4-armed skeleton. Oops. I am just all... Okay, so apparently I touched something I shouldn't have. Here we go. It's a different mouse this week. That's my excuse. Different mouse. So no, it looks like I pressed the mouse button and was then scrolling with the mouse. So I always like this creature. 4-armed skeleton, like, hey, twice the fun. Turn the weapon department. And it was the stat block. Where is that? Oh, here he is, right here. The skeletal tomb guardian. What I loved about this was just it got these 4 attacks. I was like, it's just Dungeon Master. It's fun throwing dice. So I want to do something similar to this in 5th edition. Shit, Justin again. Blame the IT upgrade, of course. So what I wanted to do was come up with a legendary skeleton, to capture the fact that this skeleton has 4 arms. It's slashing everywhere. It's just dangerous to be next to it. And I thought of it. It was called the Tomb Guardian in 4th. And I wanted to tie this to Orcus. I was trying to think, what's Orcus? What's he up to? I don't think he'd make a Tomb Guardian, because he's more active than that. He doesn't just have his undead just hanging out waiting for someone to try to rob a tomb. So instead, what I thought was, well, what if we had a skeleton that was like a gift from Orcus that was there to protect the cult leaders? So that's where this idea of the Guardian skeleton came from. It's that 4-armed skeleton with 4 scimitars. And so I was aiming for a challenge of 3 with a legendary creature, which is not easy to hit. Oh, did this wrap around? Oh, that's weird. Okay, maybe just... Oh, there it is. There we are. Sorry, scroll up by it. So I was aiming for challenge 3, and I was able to get, with the spreadsheet, hit it. But again, remember, spreadsheet's just our first step. That just tells me this might be plausible. Now I need to play test. So what I did with this creature in designing it was I wanted to bring in a legendary creature at low challenge. We don't really have many of those. So what I started with, and I started with this idea that it's a creature that's there to defend a cult leader. That's its story. It's like basically a blessing from Orcus. So the first thing we had to do, we have the Genericon. The first thing I really had to work on, just starting with the spreadsheet, was just put in some placeholder numbers for armor class and hit dice, just things that felt plausible, and then really go to work saying, what can my balance of damage versus my challenge look like? And so what you see here is I wanted to get lots of attacks, so I had to go for lots of small attacks. And this is even a case where, as I was working on it, I ended up with the dexterity based off of 6 damaged hits seeming to work pretty well. Though actually I'm curious, I can see I made a mistake with my... Oh wait, no, I picked it up. I think I picked it up. Anyways, we'll see. So 2 attacks at 6 damage each. I'm just going to plug in 12 damage. That's its on-turn actions. Don't want anything happening off-turn, though you'll see in a second. We'll get to the legendary actions down below. And So yeah, I don't want anything else, any reactions that are doing damage getting thrown on. Then with my legendary actions, doing 6 damage, use the same scimitar attack, and then it just, here would just say, hey, how many times over 3 rounds are you going to use this? Typically assuming you're damaging attacks, if you can use them all the time, you'll just use all of them. So what the big shift here was, rather than having 3 legendary actions, it gets 2. And that damage came in. So I entered all that information. That seemed like a kind of the minimum level. I don't think I could be doing less than 6 damage, because then I'm either, I guess I could go for 14 dexterity. So 5 or 6 kind of felt like minimum viable. And then from there started looking at, does this yield reasonable armor class and hit point numbers? So punching in all of that, getting my 36 points of damage, my legendary actions over the course of 3 rounds, 12 damage possible, on average for each of the other 3 rounds. Average damage output of 24, and then I just went back here and tinkered with what the attack bonus would look like, hit points, AC, and so on. And what we ended up with was this creature with AC 13, 65 hit points, and those 2 attacks on its turn, and up to 2 attacks as legendary actions. Now, that's just our basic combat functionality. Before I added anything else, I then just went on to D&D Beyond and said, okay, this guy's coming in at Challenge 3. I just want to reset all my filters and just say, look, show me Challenge 3 creatures. I want to make sure that these hit points and AC don't feel way off, way off. And again, what I want to look for is a good comparison. So when I think of this creature, something like the Bugbear Chieftain might not actually be the best comparison. I want something that's kind of like just a straight up warrior type. So here, let me just go to the next page, see if I find something a little more fitting. Something that says priest feels like it's probably going to be a spellcaster. This is an area where things like the giant scorpion could potentially be useful. And I'm actually going to take a peek at that, because this typically beasts are just pure attacks and armor class and hit points. So taking a look at the giant scorpion in comparison, I see AC 15 and 15. Here, I'll kind of zoom in a bit. There we go. I see AC 15 and 52 hit points. I compare that to our Skeletal Garden. Oh yeah, they're in the same neighborhood. Then I look at its damage. I know the scorpion actually does pretty good damage because it's got that poison sting. But it's doing 6 damage with its claw. It can make 2 claw attacks. Then it's got 7 damage and potentially 22 poison damage with its sting. All that being added up, well, this 7 and 22 is 22 gated by you have to hit and then you get a saving throw. That feels about equivalent. I feel like right now, comparing the Skeleton Guardian to the Scorpion, I still have some room to add some features, but maybe not damaging features. And so that's then when I went to work saying, okay, I want this creature to have this feel of being a bodyguard. What are some things I can do? Well, straight off, it's a legendary creature, so I'm going to give it legendary resistance. Makes this creature much harder to shut down with a spell. It also means it's much harder to turn, because turning is a saving throw. Then I threw in this basically the Wall of Blades ability. Essentially, if you try to attack any of its allies while they're within 5 feet of it, those attacks are at disadvantage. That felt like a pretty simple way to give a good bodyguard feeling ability. I didn't want to make this require the reaction, just because I don't want the Dungeon Master to have to be thinking about that. As well, it used its Wall of Blades, its reaction's gone, so now someone else can step in and attack. I don't really feel like it's protecting anymore. But I did think about that a bit, as wouldn't it be interesting, though, to find a use for its reaction that's not a damaging effect. And so what I came up with was this Shield of Blasphemy, which says, the Guardian Skeleton expends a use of legendary resistance and applies the effect to an ally within 30 feet. So taking that legendary resistance that we give to many of our legendary creatures, and letting this creature use it to help its allies. Again, tying into that feel of this is a bodyguard, it's been sent to protect an important person or creature. It lets this creature give up its abilities to shield an ally from a spell. What's also kind of interesting is that the party throws a big shutdown spell. This creature could in theory use legendary resistance on itself and then use its reaction to use it on one of its allies. So it could use both in one go, just to essentially cancel out a very powerful or encounter tilting spell, at least for 2 people. See, question from Archmage Eric. Mike, though, while the Guardian can take action, implies legendary actions are within that realm. I believe it would include reactions. So yeah, this is just basically to capture the idea if it's been knocked unconscious or otherwise unable to act, then it can no longer actively defend. It's basically saying we don't want this to cost an action, but we don't want you to be able to use it if you can't take actions. So it's just getting across this idea that it is actively doing something, but it's not so much that it takes up the creature's reaction. So yeah. So yeah, and Korgashan mentions the Mearls already uses a reaction to add AC through the use of many blades. That's also, yeah, that is something where, even though they're very different in challenge, that would be something to look at, especially in wording these abilities, to see if there are good comparisons here. Sometimes these comparisons are easy to find, like fire resistance or fire immunity. Other times you have to get a little more creative and think, what's the flavor I'm going for? What creature has a similar flavor? So yeah, and then for the legendary actions, I just gave it can make an extra scimitar attack. And then thinking about, again, going back to that idea of it's a guardian, letting it move up to 20 feet without provoking. So that either lets it keep up with whoever it's guarding, or get across the room to protect them, or and so on. So, or make a sudden movement if the rogue pops out of the shadows and assassin tries to attack someone. At the end of the rogue's turn, this skeleton can turn and zip over there to threaten the rogue or protect whoever might be trying to attack. So yeah, so that's where we were with this creature. So this, again, I wanted to walk you through this, and again, what I hope is getting across is this idea that we have this spreadsheet, but it is only one tool, and it is subservient to the idea of what's this creature's identity, what is the story, what's the experience of fighting it, that you're really using this in some ways, it forces you to zero in on what you see as the important mechanic, or the expression of that mechanic. Now, this is another creature where, thinking back to the Blazing Skeleton, I want to kind of test how close am I to challenge 3. If I was just simply to increase the damage by 1, am I tilting over? No, I'm not. Okay, well, that's good. That, and I'm just gonna, I like to kind of do these little stress, it's a stress test or whatever, quote unquote. But we can see, okay, there's a little bit of give here. I'm not like right up against what the system says. It's not like the Blazing Skeleton where I'm like, okay, I have to keep a real close eye on that aura ability, because if this is proving, if any one of these things proves better than I expected, it could be too good for its challenge. This creature here looks like it might be a little bit off. I don't need to be as precise. And obviously I'm still going to play test it, but going in, I'm not necessarily looking for, like, one ability could throw it off. So see if we have any questions here. In creating monsters, pardon me if I'm not super well read on this, is there a suggested cap for highest ability scores? The system caps ability scores at 30. And that's just thinking that in terms of a 30, that's a plus 10 ability modifier. And within how the game works, it's probably as high as you need to go. Though 30, it's kind of a soft cap. Like, I think if you went above it, if you had a reason to do it, it's not the end of the world. It's not like the game crashes if you give something a 35 or a 40. A lot of it is just in terms of conceptualizing a creature. What does a 40 or 50 strength really mean, or intelligence? So that's the end of the questions bouncing around here. Connor Pender 1, did I miss Dice Camera action? No, it should be later on today. I am not preempting them. Okay. So, did we get a sense? Thor Lolking. I hope I'm getting that right. Will there ever be a Monsters Above CR 30? I don't know. The system definitely starts breaking down once you get there. Especially as you get to higher levels, you start getting, there's so much variance that fights could be trash the party, or the creature might get trashed. So we might, but those are, again, they're very tricky because there's so much variance at that level. It's hard to get very predictable with what. It might be kind of meaningless versus challenge 25. Hadner Fallen Mike, could a necromancer summon it and abuse its shield of blasphemy? Yeah, I think actually this is one thing you have to watch out for, is to consider, like, what if you had a necromancer with like 5 of these and was just using it to basically like just shut down all saving throws. That is something to consider, especially at the low challenge. And that might be something where Shield of Blasphemy itself might need a rider. And that's something where like sort of theory crafting can be handy, where someone's like, hey, this could happen. And maybe we'd say, okay, Shield of Blasphemy might even say a creature can only gain the benefit of this ability once per day, or something like that. The question, why hasn't Legendary Resistance been used for lower CR previously? Titbit, typically that's because at low levels, the players may not have as many spells available. Or they won't. And so arbitrarily, essentially, to just call it what it is, shutting down a spell is much more punishing if you're like, I have 3 spells, versus if I'm 7th or 8th level and I have like 10 or 11. So we typically, that's why I cut it down to 2 per day. I could see going down to 1 per day if it didn't have Shield of Blasphemy. But I could also see that this creature, maybe that doesn't quite fit, even though this creature is legendary, it's a bit more subservient. Maybe Legendary Resistance just goes away and Shield of Blasphemy just becomes a once per day ability. So that's something that I would keep an eye on. The Hawkspar 10, if a Necromancer summoned it, would it get legendary action still? Yeah, it would function as printed. If there was an issue there, we would probably say in the stat block itself or somewhere in the description, if we felt like it was going to have an interaction there we didn't want to have happen, we'd probably have to just shut that down in the creature itself. The let's see. Is Archmage Eric follow up for the ability scores? Scaling. As far as ability scores, scaling with challenge, not really. It's just more the mathematical effect. So if you gave a creature you intend to be challenge 5 a 20 strength, you would just see its damage and accuracy would go up, and that's really the limiting factor there. So cool. All right. Let's see. M. Draco, is the Cone and the Fear spell maintained as long as concentration lasts? Hit me up on Twitter if you have a question. I want to try to focus on the monster stuff, but it would depend really on the spell's description. So it probably, I would say no. It's probably what's happening is it's just the effect on the creatures rather than the cone inflicting new creatures of the effect. But yeah. Let's see. MD Saraji, is it possible to control the Guardian Skeleton with Control Undead? That's one I'll do a quick look up on, because that's another one to think of. Here, we'll just go to our, just embiggen here. Because that is something to consider too, especially once we get, see, that's the Necromancer class feature, right? Not seeing it here. There we go. And begin. Got Command Undead starting at 14th level. You can use magic to bring undead under your control. Yeah, unless it says something here specifically about legendary creatures not being subject to this.